Alrighty, so I kind of wanted to talk about the new artifact system a little bit more. I know it's supposed to be dropping on JP probably tomorrow or something. I don't know exactly when I'm going to put this video out. But I, when I woke up this morning and I originally looked at like the patch notes and stuff like that, I didn't realize that it was what it was, I guess. Like I sort of had a vague idea of what it was, but now that there's, you know, it's been a little bit longer and there's been more translations and stuff like that, it actually seems really, really interesting, and I think it kind of does what I wanted it to do, which is sort of like buff old units and maybe make them a little bit more viable, so that way they're actually might be able to be used in PvP and stuff like that in the newer meta, which is pretty cool in my opinion. Like I hate to see a bunch of old characters and stuff like that get phased out just because there's like newer characters that are bigger and better and like far beyond what these old characters can even comprehend. So I've got the Korean live stream up a little bit. Apparently when I was just looking at the JP live stream, they really did a bad job of like showing off stuff, because I don't know what it is. The JP live stream is always like doing their own thing, while the Korean live stream always like starts up with new stuff and they show a bunch of cool stuff off, and I don't know, JP always ends up like beating around the bush for a long time. But anyways, so there's the new game mode or whatever, the new boss battle event, which is really, really cool in my opinion. Apparently you're going to have to grind that and everything to get different sorts of resources, so that way you can craft these artifacts, which is honest, or I keep calling them artifacts, but they're holy relics. And you'll have to, you know, fight this new Griffin boss and stuff, and I guess there's different difficulties, and I don't know exactly how hard it's going to be, but I think they fight it on the lowest difficulty, which doesn't seem like it was anything too crazy. But I'm imagining, you know, just like anything else in the game, the higher up, or the higher the difficulty that you run it on, the better materials that you'll get from it, or the better quantity of materials that you'll get from it. But yeah, so there are a really interesting set of characters that they're doing the first batch for, and it's really cool because I guess they're doing it sort of like they did with UR gear initially, where, you know, X amount of characters are getting UR gear for each update or whatever. I imagine they'll kind of start rolling this out, maybe, you know, slowly, and testing it out and seeing how it goes and everything. But they decided to give Purgatory Bond 1 very early, which I think is kind of interesting. I really hope that they go forward and they make newer characters not have such a crazy effect from it, because I would rather old characters get better buffs so that way they can become more viable. But, you know, that's just me being wishful, I guess, with it. But yeah, honestly, they show off a little bit. Each character, it looks like it's pretty much like tailor-made for them, which I think is really, really cool. So Purgatory Bonds is basically like a set of like cufflinks or whatever on his hands, almost kind of like a new set of gloves. Lilia's is kind of like some things that go on her like forearms that kind of glow and everything, and they just look really like designed for those specific characters and everything, which is really, really cool to me. You can see they're in the same sort of cosmetics area. I think I skipped over it there, but when you go and I guess they go into the closet. Yeah, okay, so you have your 3 normal cosmetic areas, and then you have the Relic, which is really, really cool. I think that's pretty interesting. I wonder if you can still run any cosmetic with it, like, because these are so close to the hands, I would imagine you would be able to. But yeah, I don't know, it just looks really, really cool to me. They even showed off, for one, they showed off Twigos, which is basically just like a beam sword, like a light sword, which I think is really, really funny. I think they showed the animation for it. I wanted to show that off because it actually looked pretty cool, but I can't remember exactly where it was. I think you can do this now and actually scan through a little bit better. I think this is them crafting it, maybe. So 5 million gold, and it takes 4 different resources, and then it's just like a little anvil and a hammer beating on it, and then you get the item out of it, which I think looks really, really cool. Like, I feel like they've always done really good with like the menu animations and different kinds of stuff like that. Like Super Awakening looks really cool, and etc, etc. But let's actually go over the characters, because I kind of want to see, like, I kind of want to show what they do. The reason why I'm kind of hesitant on the whole Purgatory Bond one is just because he's such a new unit. I don't think he really deserves to have like another buff just yet. but I think his is okay. Like, his isn't anything super crazy. Okay, so let me just read it first before I stutter all over myself. Purgatory Bonds is whenever an ally dies, increases the hero's maximum HP, I don't know what that O is for, by 15%. So he gets a little bit more potential for soloing, which is kind of interesting. So if you kill everybody except for him, or if you try to save him for last, it's probably going to bite you, because he's just going to be able to start doing a lot more damage. So I think it would still be considered a big plus to go after Excalibur Arthur first, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, Excalibur Arthur makes it to where he gains an extra 15%. If I'm not mistaken. Oh yeah, it's not Excalibur Arthur. So his passive is increases allies' maximum HP by 30% and their damage dealt to enemies by 20%. So I think killing Arthur would definitely still be a huge plus, because it would cut his maximum HP that he gains from Arthur by half, because he's gonna, as soon as you kill Arthur, he's gonna gain 15% from his relic. And it's going to cut down on his damage dealt, which is going to be definitely the play, but you would probably want to kill Arthur and then probably kill him right after that, because even if you killed him and then Twigo came down, which also might be an issue because Twigo has one as well, but I don't know, it just feels so early for Arthur, or for Bond, to be getting, you know, a buff, because he's just like, he's a pretty new festival, like he's literally the newest like regular festival unit there is. But I don't know, that might be just me. But yeah, anyways, he's got one. It's pretty halfway decent. Next up, we have Brawler Bond, which is pretty interesting, and he has just like a very cut and dry one. It just increases the damage dealt to enemies by 25%, which is a pretty hefty buff, I've got to say. I feel like if you actually buffed some of these characters up and had them level 90 and super awaken them all the way, they could probably deal some pretty hefty damage, especially with their damage dealt being increased by this artifact. So I'm not the biggest fan of, you know, Brawler Bond, but I think he might have some potential to do something decent. I don't know. There's 2 SSR ones and an SR one, so you might be able to pull something out there. So that's kind of interesting. At least 3 characters are going to be getting the buff from this particular Holy Relic. Next we have Adventurer Bond, which the only Adventurer Bond that I really even consider to be good is this green one. And I think his is kind of interesting as well. So whenever the hero lands, or whenever the hero's attack lands as a crit, increases the hero's attack by 10% with a limit of 5. So you can basically buff his damage up to 50% if he crits enough, and that makes him deal a lot more damage. So honestly, pretty interesting. I think that could definitely pull out some big numbers, especially with him having the AoE extort. Like, I know a lot of people, whenever they do 4v4 game modes and stuff like that, they end up pulling this Bond out because, you know, they extort all 4 characters. He gains a lot of stats. He goes in with the AoE attack and it deals a lot of damage. So that's just going to make him do even more, which I think is pretty cool, because he's already kind of dropped off. Like, I feel like only like very limited amount of players even use this unit to begin with, and he's a coin shop unit, so you could probably pull some, you know, like anybody could get him. And you could probably pull some decent numbers with him. So with him getting one, I think it's pretty interesting. I would have rather them gave the Purgatory Bond one to just somebody else that maybe deserves to be pulled back into the meta, maybe. But I don't know. Next up is Lilia, which is the Awakened Lilia, which I thought was kind of interesting. So hers is, for each debuff on the enemy, increases the basic stats of the hero by 10%, limit of 5. So with her passive making it to where they gain corrosion, applies corrosion on enemies with 3 orbs or less. So pretty much, unless they're just running like ult food and they have Merlin in the back, which even then, I think they're still only going to get away with having 3 orbs on their bar first turn. So everybody's going to pretty much get a corrosion stack, which is going to give her at least pretty much 30% basic stats, which is pretty good. I don't think she does like anything super crazy as far as like damage goes, but you know, those basic stats are definitely going to help. So That one's pretty interesting. This regular Lilia is also getting one when a debuff is cleansed on the hero, recovers 15% of diminished HP. I'm not super sure how I feel about this one specifically, because if I'm not mistaken, the green Lilia pretty much isn't going to benefit from this one nearly as much, because the only reason it works on the blue Lilia is because she has a cleanse at level 2, and I don't know, the green Lilia just doesn't have anything going for her, and unless you just have someone else on the team who does cleanse, then it really doesn't matter. And plus, the green Lilia is sort of a back slot unit that you put as a sub slot to help you do more damage in PvP or something like that. I can't remember exactly how the passive is worded, but she doesn't seem like she's going to get any use out of it, which is unfortunate. But I guess blue Lilia is the better one anyway, so I don't know. I'm pretty sure these are going to work in PvE and stuff like that as well, so could be pretty interesting for maybe some PvE strats, but I definitely don't think this is going to make the character like PvP viable by any means. Twigos is really interesting. So this is going to be another instance of the Purgatory Bond getting a huge buff, the Purgatory Bond team, because like I said, if you go for Arthur first and you drop down his, you know, max HP by 15% because he's going to gain this buff, and you take off his damage dealt by 20%, Twigo is probably going to come down from the back end. I think this one is definitely going to cement him as the better unit to use instead of Red Griamore on the team, because every once in a while I do run into a team that runs Red Griamore on the Purgatory Bond team. So he's going to come down, he's going to start the battle, like whenever he enters the battle, at the start of the battle for 2 turns, increases the hero's HP related stats by 30%, and taunt the enemy. So he's going to become super tanky, and you have to hit him with single target abilities, which is going to be pretty funny. So if you're using like a Escanor team, which is very single target, or yeah, single target, you're going to kill Arthur. He's going to lose a couple of his stats, but he's going to gain his passive with the Relic. But then Twigo's going to come down, taunt you, and he's going to become more tanky, so it's harder to kill him, and you're not going to be able to target Bond, which is that much more interesting. Obviously, if you're using an AoE team, like if you're using Margaret against him, it's probably not going to help nearly as much, but I think that that's a really cool move for Twigo to have, like a really nice passive to add to his sort of character, because, I mean, it makes sense. I think it'll be a cool little thing to sort of help deter people from hitting Bond. I don't know, it's just, that one's really, really cool in my opinion, probably one of the cooler ones. Jillian is next. Jillian's is whenever the hero receives damage, recovers the hero's max HP by 20% at the start of the ally's turn. I really don't think that this one's anything too crazy. People use Jillian just like they use Twigo and Alioni, but I don't really think Jillian can hold her own in a lot of situations. Like, she really doesn't have a whole lot going for her as far as like attack and stuff like that goes. So even though this one would be nice to have, I guess, I don't think it's going to make too much of a difference if she ends up coming out onto the field from a sub-slot sort of, you know, formation. So, I don't know. Not crazy about Jillian's. I think that she probably deserves a little bit better than that. She is an SR hero, but like I said, she's pretty much a sub-slot unit like a bunch of the other characters are. So, yeah. Next up, we have Alioni, which is I think I was kind of lackluster with his at first because I was like, oh, like it feels like Twigo got much better treatment. But thinking about it, his is actually pretty good too, because it reduces damage received by 40%, which is pretty high. Like, that almost cuts it in half. And if you partner it with his taunt, he has a level 1 taunt. Like if he comes down out of the back slot and you pull one of these cards, you're going to taunt. That's also going to decrease damage taken by 30%, 45%, or 75%, depending on, I guess, how lucky you get or if you upgrade it or whatever. So the fact that he would just become like an ultra tank if he came down from the back end, and you use this card, like, obviously it's not as good as Twigo's because Twigo just gets the taunt immediately. But if you get lucky enough to use the taunt while you're having to get the effect from your relic, I think it could be really, really good. So I think that that's really neat that they're giving sort of like these backline characters, these sub-slot units, a tankier sort of passive that makes them a little bit more, I guess, reliable if they come down into play, so that way they can maybe take the heat off the rest of your team. I think that's a really smart move. I kind of hope that they take into consideration how new some of the characters are and whether they deserve to be buffed a lot more, or maybe they should just wait and maybe not do some of the festival units so early. And maybe, you know, depending on how often they're going to push these things out, like a new selection of characters and everything like that, maybe wait and do some of these festival units later when they could actually use the buff and they maybe have gotten phased out of PvP or something like that, so that way, you know, it can try to bring them back in. So I don't know, I think it's just going to be all about timing and how good each one is. That'll actually determine whether a character is going to sort of bounce back into the meta. But I think it's a really cool idea so far. I think that they do a really good job of like making them look like cool and unique, and all of them seem very character dependent, which is really interesting. The fact that so far it looks like it's just going to be very like content based, I guess, like you just grind the materials out and stuff like that by playing the game and sort of like crafting these things, I think is a really, really cool mechanic. Like I hope that, like the card system, this isn't going to be something that you can just buy materials for, which I could definitely see this being something where it's like, oh hey, if you don't want to grind out this thing 400 times in a row, feel free to just buy the bundle in the shop and you'll get, you know, X amount of rewards or whatever the case may be. I could definitely see that being a thing, but I think it'll also be, as long as this new game mode isn't super tedious and like annoying to run, it should be worth, you know, grinding out and trying to make some of these relics for characters. So yeah, I think it's really interesting. I think that so far the execution of it looks really good. It just depends on, you know, future developments with the feature and everything like that. But I'm pretty interested in it so far. Let me know what you guys think. That's pretty much it for me though. That's all I have to go over at the moment. So thank you guys so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe for more content in the future, and I'll see you guys in the next video.